Dr. Alauna, and welcome to Demystifying Mental Health. You know, the African American community, the Black community, is one of the strongest in the world. We have faced generations of trauma, and yet we still continue to rise. So somehow we have to think about the weight of history and how it can show up in how we think and how we feel and how we behave. So today, this is the first episode of Demystifying Mental Health, and I'm going to be teaching you about the science of behavior. And it's so important for us to understand how these traumatic experiences that we have sustained ourselves individually, our families, our community, that impacts our brain. And if we understand how that impacts us, we as a community can heal and we can thrive. So, the purpose of this show is to be able to help you answer the questions of why. Do you ever walk around scratching your head about the stuff that you see these days and being like, oh my gosh, like what is happening, right? Like, why? What is going on with the world today? And what is wrong with people? And I am a person who loves asking the question why. My mom will tell you that all her friends, when I was a little girl, they called me 20 questions because I always wanted to know why. And in fact, at some point, she bought me a whole encyclopedia set. So I understand Cat Williams just like reading every day, just trying to understand why. Okay. So this is what led me to medicine, is what led me to be who I am. So that's what we're going to do in this episode today is talk about the brain and trauma and unlocking the why behind our behavior. The point of this episode is really to help you explore a few things. Number one, our identity. Our identity, who are we? What are we as human beings? We have a tendency to really struggle sometimes on the concept of what it means to actually be a human being. And we're going to talk about brain function. We can't have that conversation without having a real talk about what's going on in our brain and the thought patterns that arise from that brain. This is going to help us not only as individuals, but this is going to help us as a species because if you are watching the same news I'm watching, you probably would agree that the humans are not doing too well. We, we are not okay. Okay, we're not okay. It's not okay. It's not okay right now. However, that is the reason that we need this show because we have so many myths about emotion. We have so much false information that is flying around that I think it's so important for us to learn about our brains and be able to speak about our mental health and our psychology in a informed, grounded, scientific, evidence-based way. So just to tell you a little format about how this show is going to work, this first episode is going to just be me by myself teaching you and explaining how you can almost think about the world like I do, like a trauma psychiatrist. However, as we go along in other episodes, we're going to be having some guests. I'm going to have some of my awesome friends who are great, not only in what they do, but in explaining what they do. So you'll get more information. We're going to talk about ADHD, bipolar disorder, dementia, including Alzheimer's disorder, frontal temporal type of dementias. We're going to talk about depression and anxiety and PTSD and addictions and personality disorders and eating disorders and all the things. But I need your help. This show is interactive. This is not just going to be me talking. So in the comments, drop for me some of the questions that you have about mental health. What things would you ask of your doctor if you had a doctor that could just answer your questions on demand? That's not what this is, not on demand, but I will answer the questions that you have about mental health through this show, through this platform, and hopefully help lead you and guide you to some wellness. That's the goal of this, is to be able to give you the tools that you need in order to control your own mental health, control your own destiny, control, as I call it, your own animal. So feel free whenever you're watching this. I know that we are live right now, and that's the beauty of live programming, that I can see your comments and we can chat and we can connect. But even after this, whenever you're watching it, wherever you're watching it, put your questions so that we can answer them and make sure that we know and hear from you. Now, also, feel free to help this program by clicking the like button. Ding! Did you do it? Thank you. I appreciate it. That is a free way to support this program, to let blackdoctor.org know, to bring more of this into their programming, and to let people know about this, because we know that while you're here today, but there's somebody else that needs to hear this message. So share this with your friends and family, your colleagues, and even your patients. And thank you for supporting this show, and get the notification for the next episode. All right, you guys, let's get into it. Now, the first thing I really want to get into as we talk about why do we behave the way we do is that it's important to understand the powerful impact of having traumatic experiences. I am Dr. Alauna, trauma psychiatrist. So let me tell you a little bit about how I got here. I practiced medicine at the VA hospital, and I was a PTSD specialist. I enjoyed my training at the VA, and I was just drawn to veterans, for one, in part because I'm the child of a Vietnam veteran, but I also have a lot of military people in my family and a lot of people who have served. And that was my way of being able to do it, because I knew these knees and this body, these joints would not hold up for the military. So as I was treating veterans in the VA, I think I taught them as much as they taught me. I learned and absorbed so many of their stories, and really was able to appreciate in a deeper way than even I'd been taught in class in medical school, about how traumatic experiences shape a person's mind and shape the way that they think. And when I came into medicine 20 years ago, I can't believe it's been that long, but it's been 20 years. Uh, we did not really talk about trauma as something that everyone had. And we still have a long way to go to catch up on the concept that trauma is really core to all mental illnesses. And let me explain what I mean by that. Trauma shapes our reactions, our behaviors, our decision making. A lot of times when we are talking about behaviors, those behaviors and those beliefs have been passed from generation to generation to generation. And all along, people have been experiencing trauma that has been shaping how they interpret the world, how they raise their children. So this is not just in our physical bodies, this is also in our psychological body. And that's what we have to learn to think of when we're talking about trauma. Because often we have a tendency to think about it as it has to be horrible, terrible, the worstest of the worstest of the worstest in order for us to count. I know worstest is not a word, but you know what I'm saying. In order for us to think of it as traumatic, we have to, lose a leg in battle, in war. We have to, somebody has to be an overt victim of a crime. And that's what we think of as trauma. However, trauma is much more simple than that. Trauma is really something that should be identified through the individual and how they experience it. So I offer this definition of trauma that might be a little bit different than how you may have thought of it before. And that is any situation that you experience that changes the way you think of the world and yourself and other people negatively. Okay. And so sometimes we don't even realize when the traumas are happening that it is traumatic. And for some people, this may even be the first time that you think of that thing that you went through as qualifying as a trauma. But how you know is when you start looking at yourself and looking at that thing you went through. Did it change the way I negatively change the way I thought about myself, the world, and other people? Did I start becoming more extreme when it came to that situation? For many people, I'll tell you a situation that helped me see the difference with this. In the military, There's a thing about Jody got your girl. Okay, that's a situation when they go off to battle and their girls are back home and they end up getting talked into a relationship by Jody. And I had a veteran who came to see me. I've had more than one that came to see me with those kind of stories, and his symptomology was exactly that of PTSD. His thought process had changed, his reactions, his way of dealing with relationships and women had become extremely negative, and he had all of the symptoms of PTSD, but it wasn't a quote qualifying trauma to be able to identify it. But that for him had resulted in the same thing, and it really made me start thinking about how to explain this better to my veterans. And so, as I began to do more research and get into the science and get into more reading, I began to recognize these brain systems, not just in their behaviors, but also in my own. Mm, y'all, if I could go back and describe the years in like 2015, 2016, 2017, that's for another episode. But this was long after my medical studies. This was long after I was practicing medicine that I was beginning to really dig deeper into what our advanced technology of having PET scans and MRIs and EEGs and other information was telling us. And I realized that we have not been taught to think about our brain as the core of our mentalness, as the core of our mental experience, I should say. And that is really, it was almost like a light bulb moment as I realized that a lot of these behaviors that we're having are occurring because we have these invisible traumas that have not been treated, haven't been addressed. So I'm going to pause there and also remind you, if you haven't already, go ahead and like this so that everybody can know, and share it with your friends, family, and other people so they can come get this good information. So I want to point out a couple of things about the way that this program is going to work. Because every time you're here, I'm going to challenge you to think deeper about yourself and who you are. I'm going to challenge you to come a little bit out of the identity that you have been told that you are, and thinking about yourself on a deeper level. This is not only about mental health, this is about your spiritual health. And so let's talk a little bit now about our identity. Okay, unlocking our identity. How do we get our identity? In the chat for me, I see you, Rhonda. In the chat for me, drop some of the ways that you think that we learn about ourselves and who we are, right? And from a baby, when you get here, how do you start learning about your identity? Who tells you who you are? I'll wait. So I know for a lot of us, it may be our parents, right? It could be our grandparents. Danielle says our society, who's around us, the environment. So who is that? That's our teachers, right? That is our coaches and the other people that are, I love that word, credible others, right? The role models, the people we look up to, the people on television, the shows that we like, that we enjoy, the characters that we see, right? These are the ways that we begin to shape our identity. And our identity is really, we get a name, and for many of us, we keep that name throughout our life. But, sometimes it doesn't seem to fit with who we are as we evolve through our life. And then we change that, right? So this is really about how do we understand ourselves in the world. Well, one of the things that is important to understand is that all human beings, if you have a working brain, this is for you. All human beings, in the identity standpoint, are made up the same way. We are animal, human, and spirit. A three-part creature. Animal, like you have this physical body, okay? And then human, that's the term that we use for ourselves, Homo sapien. which is actually one race, by the way. I'm sure there'll be other episodes that we get more into the genetics and the DNA, but we actually even use the language of identifying ourselves incorrectly because we are 99.9% genetically the same. Hmm. I'm going to say that one more time because it's important. Our 6 billion little tiny codes of chemicals that we call DNA that make up who we are, 99.9% of those are identical between me, you, and others. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter what their skin looks like. It doesn't matter if they're male, female, non-binary, intersex. It doesn't matter if they're Asian or it's like nothing. Nothing matters. You can't give away the fact that you have this physical body, and you also can't lose your spirit, that invisible part of yourself. As long as you are here, present and upright on earth, you are made of animal, human, spirit. Okay, so you will hear me reference you as a creator. And the reason that I call my students creators and the people who are joining me, I consider this is education, y'all. I'm retired from clinical practice. I forgot to mention that. So I'm sorry you can't get on my schedule. You can't get on my calendar because I don't have one. Okay. This is education. This is what I do now. And the best way to learn is to actually practice the awareness of yourself as a physical thing and then also as a psychological thing. Because remember, we learn about chemicals and cells, we learn about organs and tissues and all the parts of us that make up this body. However, we don't get any formal education about ourselves and the non physical elements of ourselves. Okay? The non physical element of you. Whenever I go and I give talks, I ask people, how many hours of official education and training did you get about emotions? So I'll ask you that question as well. You can drop it in the chat. How many hours, if any? The answer might be zero. Most of the time, zero is the answer. And that's across all education and trainings and degrees, almost no formal education about the thing that you use every single day. You use your brain every day, your emotions are present every day. Yet, even though we are captive in school and they teach us geometry and I love school. I was a straight A student my entire life. I have the degrees, I have the certifications. I promise you, I love school. But this information was not in there. And that handicaps us. That has created a society that has almost no emotion recognition. We are an emotionally disabled species because we know not ourselves. Oh my goodness. We have to understand our identity, y'all. It's essential. So, as we go through, as you join me for Demystifying Mental Health, we're going to not only talk about this identity, but we're also going to practice controlling the power that is within us. Because I explain to folks every day, you are the greatest technology on earth. It's you. It's not your smartphone that sometimes makes you dumb. It's not your computer. It's not AI. It's you. This body is a cauldron of a chemical laboratory. It's really fascinating. I mean, it just studying and understanding the beauty, the interest. I mean, it's a wonder. If you understand human embryology, we're going to have that whole conversation because we need to talk about human development and how it works and why that's so important for everyone to understand in order for us to make decisions about our health. When we're developing, it's a wonder that all of us develop and actually most of us get here with 10 fingers and toes and ears in the right place. Them jokers could be on top of our head. We should thank God that as things grow and change in this miraculous human body, that we, even some of us, don't get here with all of the what we think of as the normal stuff that a human's supposed to have. That's a reality. That's why we have hospitals, children's hospitals, and all kinds of doctors that see all different types of humans. Okay, so my point is that understanding this biology and understanding the way that our brain interprets the world and creates a whole internal experience that we call our mind, is so important to understand that as a reality, a biological thing. We've been raised in a system that tells us that mental health is for those people over there. That, we don't talk about them. They they crazy. And we had words for people that we didn't understand. Right? What are some of the ways that we talk about people that we don't understand? Is they off, right? We'll say they touched in the head, or they have all of these terms for it that are not technical terms, but they're just the way that people understood it. I'm gonna tell you this, give you a little bit of background on me. I come from a background of being raised missionary Baptist, okay, Christian. However, I've evolved in my understanding to where I would say I'm spiritual. We will have those conversations here where we're going to be talking about the impact of beliefs and how that drives so much of what we experience. See, and you'll hear that Christian upbringing, coming out of me in the way that I deliver this. But I want you to know that this is for everyone, because all human beings share a spiritual thread that we need to understand and acknowledge. And we have to acknowledge it every day. Like, what we're doing here is not just updating the way we think of ourselves, we have to update the way we think of other people. Because right now we're operating in a very primitive fight or flight mode that causes us to not really appreciate the way that all of us are bouncing off of each other in trauma. I see you, Delicia says, Florida, share this information on Florida Connections, please. Absolutely. Thank you for taking this to Florida. We're going to bring this all over the world because we need to understand this. This applies to everybody. I've had people that say, hey, doc, I'm this. Does this apply to me? I have this problem. This is, listen, what I'm about to tell you in this next segment, this is you. It applies to you. This is the information we should have gotten in kindergarten. We should have got this lesson in kindergarten, just like when they were teaching us elbow and tibula and fibula. They needed to teach us amygdala, but they didn't know it. This information is relatively new in terms of technology being advanced enough for us to understand and update ourselves in the way we think. So, this next segment that we're going to talk about is going to be talking about the brain and our thoughts after trauma. So, what happens with our brain and our body is that as we grow up, as we go through the world, we experience these situations that are challenging to us. We may not be thinking of it as trauma, but there's so many things that cause trauma. Trauma is, let's see if anybody can guess the thing that causes the most trauma worldwide. What do you think is the event or the type of thing that causes the most trauma? Drop it in the chat for me, and then we'll see. I know a lot of times when people say that, they go crime, and it's not crime, although you would think that. Um, and what we do know is that natural disasters, or I would say unnatural disasters, are what is on record as that on record they was. So I'm going to come to that. You're quick on the draw with it, Nikki, because invalidation is absolutely the hidden, invisible trauma. I would say is the most frequent, even more so than natural disasters. But she's a little bit ahead of me on that one. So The point of it is that lots of people experience traumas, and there's nobody after a hurricane comes through, or a tornado, or a flood or something that devastates it, that comes in and says, hey, I know you lost your house, your clothes, your thing. This is traumatic, right? And now we're getting to the point where we're starting to provide crisis services and mental health services, but we often wait until people are in dire situations and struggling tremendously before we actually connect people to the things that help them. So let's just talk about what happens to the human body and brain when we experience traumatic events. So there's going to be 6 parts of your brain that you're going to hear me talk about over and over and over again, because this brain is so important and is so influential, and it's doing things every day. It doesn't shut off, it doesn't shut down even when you go to sleep. And so these brain systems are crucial to the way that you are going to function in the world. The first brain system that I talk about is the reticular activating system, or the RAS. The RAS is one of my favorite but more subtle parts of the brain that really is influential in what you experience day to day. So our brain is trying to run on as limited energy as possible, because you're just a big chemistry set cooking up information. Your brain has to take in data through your eyes, your ears, your nose, your skin, and it's taking that data and translating all of it and kicking out conclusions that you believe are accurate. I'm here to tell you they're not. Your reticular activating system is like a filter that helps your brain to narrow in on just what you need to be aware of, just what you need to be paying attention to. And also, it's programmed by your traumatic experiences. So it's in particular looking for things that may indicate that that trauma is going to happen again. So all while you're walking around, your reticular activating system is either blocking certain elements out or bringing certain elements into your awareness. If you've ever wanted to buy a certain car, get a certain car, and you start thinking about, like, what kind of car do I want? Like, I really like that new Volvo. And then you're driving around, and all of a sudden it seems like, ooh, that car is popping up all over the road. Well, it must be a sign, Lord. That must be a sign. I'm supposed to get it, okay? And you know what? That's actually your reticular activating system that knows that that thing is now important to you. And so it's going to alert to that thing and bring it more into your conscious awareness. Did everybody go run out and buy your car? No. Your brain just tuned in to that thing because now it's important to you. This happens to us in school or in airports when the PA system is just wah, 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 and then all of a sudden you hear, oh, your name called, your city called, and all of a sudden your brain tunes in like, that's me. And you're like, they're talking to me. Your mind hones in. So those are just simple examples of that RAS. But that RAS also is the reason that your brain picks up on things. So, for example, the veteran I spoke about earlier, when your RAS, when you've been hurt by something, your reticular activating system starts thinking about everything in context of your traumatic experience. So then the next time when he's in a good relationship and is healthy and nothing's happened, but that text message goes off at 11 at night, ding, his brain is like, his RAS picks up on it. There's that technique. That's what, oh my goodness. See, it sets it off. That's just going to happen again. That's what she's doing. That's what happened the last time. And if you don't know that your brain will do that to you, your brain will hone in on those traumatic experiences so much so, and your awareness so much so is connected to that thing that you bring it into your life, into your experience without even realizing that you're being driven by that trauma. So that's your RAS. We're going to get more into these in other times. So just know that you have an opportunity to join me if you want to learn more in my Trauma Recovery Academy. Your amygdala is the part of your brain that creates your emotions. It does not just create the fear responses, but most of the time that's where people have heard about it with fight, flight, and freeze responses. And yes, it does do that. It also does all the rest of your emotions just as strong, just as well. So, your emotions, let's talk about that real quick because it's important to understand that that amygdala is constantly present, even in the background, even if you're calm or feeling good right now, you're listening to me. Drop some emotion words in the chat. How are you feeling right now? Give me some emotion words to work with. So just understand that those emotions are constant. They never go away. The way we've been taught to think about emotions is when a person is having a maybe a intense reaction. They might be crying or yelling. We actually have a tendency not to think of anger as an emotion, although it very much is. Rhonda says she's blessed today. Danielle says the emotion of sad is an emotion that we can have. Absolutely. Other emotion words could be uh, calm, they could be agitated, you could be euphoric, you could be annoyed, right? Unfulfilled, jealous, uh, ecstatic, right? All of these are states of being that that amygdala produces. And so, exactly, ease. There's a lot of times where, people think that they're not feeling emotions because they're calm. You can also not be feeling your emotions when you're numb or disconnected from them, but they are always there. Always. I wish I could poke you in the forehead. Always. Okay? They're always there. So the myth that women have too many emotions, men don't have emotions, we're not supposed to have them, you're not supposed to cry, shenanigans, pure foolishness is plugged into your biology. If you are not able to do these things, you're not experiencing your full range of human emotions, and there's some healing that we need to do because our emotions are controllable. Oh my goodness, you can control that amygdala. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm telling you, it's doable. All right. The somatosensory cortex, your SSC. Your somatosensory cortex is a part of your brain that registers pain, and it doesn't differentiate between physical pain and psychological pain. So, just like a person could push you, punch you, poke you, pinch you, there's different levels of psychological pain that one feels when someone cusses you or says something to you. Or you might even say something to yourself that gives a strong elbow to the psychological nose. Okay? Most of us do more harm and create more physical, psychological pain through our own thought processes and interpretation than other people do to us. But y'all ain't ready for that one though. So just understand that your somatosensory cortex is an element of your brain that's interpreting and registering pain and sending out signals to the rest of your body to respond to that pain. So that whole concept of sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt you. Horse pucky, okay? Horse pucky. It hurts. It actually makes physical. Just like if there was you may not have a bruise, but there is a psychological bruise, there's a scar, there's, the body keeps score, all of those things where the message is that physically you experience psychological harm. So I want you to know that it's not all in your head, it's in your body, it's in your brain, it's in you. And so it's important to understand that the somatosensory cortex is real. Because when those words come out, fly across face, yeah. Now, here's the thing. None of us like it when people do it to us, but we do it to other people a lot. Okay? So this is also where empathy is going to come into play as we get to know ourselves and know these brain systems. Next, the brain reward system. Your BRS is your addiction system. All human beings have a brain reward system. All human beings are driven by this dopamine. This chemical dopamine is a very powerful sensation, but it's very short acting. The body breaks it down very quickly. And the dopamine cycle drives human experiences. One of the things that we understand about dopamine is that dopamine is the basis of all of these behaviors that we would consider addictive. So when you think of addictions, what do you typically think of? Drop it in the chat for me. Danielle, like my horse plucky. Okay, listen, horse plucky. All right. So addictions, we have a tendency to think of uh, crack, opioids. You think of the people just drug use, they're sleeping on the corner, not functioning. But let's keep it real. Um, can anybody guess the number one addictive substance used in the world? The highest amount of addictive substance in the world? Avana says sugar. I think sugar is definitely a contender. Sex, Danielle says sex. Any other guesses? Coffee. Iris got it. Caffeine. Caffeine is the world's number one addiction. It is in teas and coffees, and we drink it all over the world. It's a huge economy. And so, absolutely, caffeine. Uh, I don't know if sugar or nicotine is next, but I'm sure they're battling, right? Because sugar is also an addictive substance. Carolyn says salt, right? All of these are actual substances that when you put them in your body, they set off that dopamine. Okay? Who and listen, we have addictions to all kinds of things, right? It's not just substances. We have behavioral addictions. Anybody else have this phone that you can't that's stuck to your hand? Or we right? Sex addictions, people addictions, porn addictions, uh, streaming reality show addictions, shopping addictions, gambling, sports fans, fanatics. What do you think a fanatic is? Right? Taylor fanatics. Okay, we can be addicted to lots of things, and that is an actual natural part of the human animal. Think about that, man. Our European ancestors went all over the world taking over, trying to get those spices and seasonings they don't even want to use, right? Okay, all right. So mirror neurons, our next brain system, because we're definitely going to talk about all these brain systems as we bring in guests. I can't wait to bring in some of my guests to talk about addiction. Anyway, mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are part of your brain that helps to absorb information from the environment around you. The mirror neurons are positioned in multiple locations throughout your brain. And so they're picking up and interpreting the words you hear, the sounds you see, and they're helping you to blend into the environment. So as we all know that babies mimic behaviors, and we see the obviousness in the babies mimicking behavior. But guess what? We never stop doing that. In fact, the concept of mirrors and selfies, this is a relatively new thing. I remember my stepdad telling me growing up, and oh, happy birthday to my poppy. I remember that growing up, he said they didn't have mirrors in the house. They were in Mississippi. He didn't even realize that he was brown or a black man until later on when they were actually able to see mirrors. And now we have these phones, we have these video screens, we have all of this, and a lot of folks getting high on their own supply. But our ability to actually see ourselves is a relatively new concept to humanity. For thousands and thousands and thousands of years, our reflection, our mirror was of each other. And so our mirror neurons are very good at picking up on things in the environment. If you've ever, this happens to me, I went to college in New Orleans, and every time I go to New Orleans, or every time I'm thinking about my New Orleans stuff, my New Orleans accent starts coming out. And I realized that that's those mirror neurons. If you ever hear somebody singing something or saying a song, and then you hear yourself saying it that way or speaking it again, it's stuck in your head, that's those mirror neurons. Now, also understand that these mirror neurons can be shaped by the traumas you experience. So sometimes, many times early in life, we're experiencing the environment around us, and our parents and ancestors, come on, y'all, they didn't know about mirror neurons. Nobody told them they were primitive. Okay, so they were just doing stuff, and they're just our how do we say it? Our ancestors did the best they could with what they have, but we have new information that we need to incorporate in our understanding. And in that way, they were they were showing us some behaviors that are deeply programmed in the way that we respond to things, especially under stress. So just knowing that those mirror neurons are there, be careful what you put into your eyes, be careful what you put into your ears, because I want to remind you that this primitive brain is programmed for you to think that you're right. Okay? That's the number one addiction, I think, is people thinking that they're right. And I hope in this understanding of your brain, you'll recognize that you need to reconsider maybe how you're thinking about these things. So, just understanding with those mirror neurons that often we are reflecting behaviors. I'll give you an example of how, as I was reading these articles and this was coming to me over time, I remember my children were a little younger, and one of the things that I was noticing is that they interrupted a lot. They would just jump in and say whatever was in the, and I'm like, why are these kids interrupting so much? That is it was frustrating me, and I was noticing them doing it. And then as I was again trying to watch myself better as I'm learning and reading these articles and thinking about my own mirror neurons, and I realized that I interrupted them a lot. Okay, I was like, ooh, I see where they get it from. And as I started speaking it out and recognizing it and controlling it and addressing it, they began to do the same thing. They began to realize their own behavior and what they were doing, and helping, it began to change their ability to recognize that as well. So, going to the next brain system, and this is the last of the six primitive brain systems that you'll hear me bring up over and over throughout the program so that they become more familiar to you and you begin to watch yourself, your biochemical matrix. Your biochemical matrix is, this is a Dr. Lana term. This is not necessarily a term in the textbook, but that's the term that I use to describe your hormones, your chemicals, the elements of your body that come together invisibly to create, they expand and extend your emotional state, is the best way I can explain that. So, for example, this is, we talked earlier about psychological pain. When your somatosensory cortex gets slapped, or when you experience even a physical injury in real life, your body creates its own endorphins. It has its own opioid system, just like heroin. It will, when you're experiencing pain, it can release a opioid into your body. Now, many times, in order to cope with our emotions, people use substances and pills and other things, alcohol and at various behaviors to try to distract themselves and change their mood. But we don't even realize that our body can create its own internal state through those endorphins. People who experience things like zoning out or feeling separated from their body, a lot of times they're experiencing the chemical effects of that biochemical matrix that they've never been taught about and need to be made aware of, because it's not that you're crazy, it's that your biology is doing things that you've never been taught to recognize. When you're having people have panic attacks, your brain is recognizing or thinking something's going on, that your RAS picks up on a thing, that amygdala generates, oh, okay, I think it's a problem, let me send out these signals in the body. Boom, your biochemical matrix, your adrenal glands dumping adrenaline into your system, and then you're feeling this panic attack, and it, from the inside it feels like I'm crazy, but what's really happening is this biology is just doing what it does. So understanding that, tools and skills, things like holding ice to break your body out of a panic attack, we'll talk about that another time. But these are all things that are associated and related to your biological state. Okay, so understanding that the you are a creator. Your body is creating at all times. Your thoughts are creative. Your anatomy, your physical body is creating. When you get mad, you get upset, you quote, go off or lose control. You don't disappear. You're talking, you're doing something. Something's doing something, right? What's doing it is this primitive brain. Your default, your default state of being is these brain systems that I've just talked about, these six primitive brain systems. They are loud, they are unruly, they are constantly giving you data and information. You can hear them. It's the negative thought in your head that tells you that you ain't ish, you ain't gonna be ish, never been ish, or whatever your brain might say to you. It might be mirroring things that have come from your environment around you, but that has nothing to do with your identity as an animal, human, and spirit. So how do we fix all of this? We've absorbed centuries of, frankly, wrong information, inaccurate ways of interpreting ourselves, curses, or things that tell us that we're crazy just for having normal human responses like emotions and feeling grief or sadness and crying, right? We've been taught it's weak, it's bad, it's all the stuff that adds to the burden that you carry. Well, we're going to evolve through understanding. Whew, thank God. Thank God there's an answer to this. And briefly, the answer is sitting right behind your forehead. Tap it. Ding, ding. Wake it up. Hey, Ray from Victoria. Ding, ding. Tap your prefrontal cortex. Wake it up. I'll tell you that the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that is your CEO. It's your best brain. It's the part of the human brain that evolved the most recent. So this is the highest technology sitting right there behind your brain. Call it what you want, call it your third eye, whatever. It is the part of your brain that helps to think about, where do I need to go from here? Logistical planning, okay? It is what are my goals and how do I get to them? And how do I keep myself on the path to get to that goal? Our prefrontal cortex is interesting because it actually takes until about the age of 24, 25, 26 for that prefrontal cortex to be what we call fully matured. Like it's there, but in children, it has to mature. The cells have to come together and grow together better. And so your prefrontal cortex is not even fully available to you until you're around 25. Now, how many life decisions did we make before 25? Come on. Let's think about it, right? So first of all, forgive yourself for most of that because you didn't even have a fully functional brain. And now also we've never been even taught to turn it on. It doesn't really fully come on. Well, it's on like 10 to 15% on. Okay. So think about like your brain, this part on a dial. And there's been studies that have shown that no matter the demographic, the background, male, female, the education, when they study our use of our brain and the different areas, we're only using 10 to 15% of the capacity of our prefrontal cortex, right? And then our kids, they don't even have that possibility. So yes, absolutely, Ray, give your kids a little bit of a leeway because that prefrontal cortex is not even fully available to them to do the type of forward thinking and problem solving and logistical planning that your highest CEO can do. So as we think about how do we evolve as human beings, we have to understand that our prefrontal cortex can regulate the input of those primitive brain systems that I just talked about. However, if we don't know that that's what we need to be doing, there's no chance of us getting it done. So now we know. Now you have a responsibility to turn on your prefrontal cortex and challenge yourself to evolve in your understanding of yourself, in your understanding of your children. This will change the way you interact with the people around you because this exercise builds empathy. And let me just connect to the concept of empathy. Empathy, I have a saying where, and you'll see this over and over, where I say, trauma hurts, empathy heals. Trauma hurts, empathy heals. And that is the shortest way that I can explain the problem and the answer of what's going on in our society. When you operate in a state lacking empathy, you actually operate in a delusional state. Delusional. I mean it too. I know you didn't come on here thinking about you were going to get called delusional, but that's what's happening today. It's delusional. And unfortunately, because we have not been taught to understand that like our experience is a product of our own brain, and the other 8 billion creators on earth have an experience that they are just as convinced is real and right and accurate. And we all are walking around in our little bitty bubble of perception, and we're thinking the other people are tripping. And yet we are not effectively controlling our own animal, our own way that we're interpreting the world and showing up in the world. So, empathy, I think, is a really important concept. You're going to hear more from me as we go through this show, because empathy is the mechanism that if we inject it into any situation, it bears fruit. Empathy is how we turn on that prefrontal cortex. Hey, come on. That's how we turn it on. So you're going to hear a lot about me from empathy, about empathy, because right now, because we are so uneducated about these concepts, what we find is that we have different definitions for some of these things. So I'd like to define words, because many people think of empathy, and even in my training, I was taught to think of empathy more as emotion, awareness, and understanding, connectedness, having a sensitivity to the underlying elements of what was going on in the room with other people. And it is empathy on a level, but we're going to crank it all the way up. And we're going to crank that up to not just stepping outside of ourselves and getting, a lot of people like to say, getting in other people's shoes. Well, let me tell you the problem with thinking of it like thinking of empathy as putting yourself in another person's shoes. Because empathy, the way that humans are currently designed, we're rarely taught to challenge our own perspective on a thing. So when we engage with other people, if we just put ourselves in their shoes, we come over there with our own perspectives, our own background, our own life, our own behavior. And there's usually something about our life that has equipped us to fix those other people's problems, right? I want you to think real quick about how humans are designed. We are designed to where I can't see myself as well as I can see someone outside of me. In fact, I can only see my hands. If I look down, I can see my legs. But the only way I can really see myself is looking here at you. And similarly, all of us are built with a big old blind spot. And where is that blind spot? Ourselves, right? We are our own biggest blind spot. And so, what we do with empathy is that we step outside of ourselves so that I'm not just taking my little 7.5s and jumping over there in your tens and then telling you, well, I see the problem here. All you have to do is just this, right? That's what we do. We take our little, you just need smaller shoes. If you would just straighten up, tidy up, apply for school, get your degree, and then all your problems will be solved, right? We can see the pathway in other people so much more than we can see in ourselves. And in fact, it's easier to focus on other people than ourselves because we are naturally oriented to believe that they are causing our internal experience, right? You make me feel happy. She makes me mad. You're getting on my nerves. The natural way that we have interpreted our emotions, especially for most of us through, lenses, maybe your cultural lens is through a lens where you look at somebody's behavior, you say, oh, that's a curse. So that they demon possessed. They crazy. For some of the folks who might struggle, such as myself, with restricting myself from the potato chips or snacks and other things. Somebody may have told that's the devil that has you in there eating those chips. No, that's my brain reward system. That's my dopamine I'm battling with. It's not your amygdala. I mean, it ain't the devil, it's your amygdala. That's what I tell people sometimes, okay? We have to really start paying more attention to and having reality-based language for understanding the invisible surges and urges that go on in our body and how those things impact our everyday way of being. Okay, so I want to make sure that I tackle your questions. Before we go, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. I'll see if I have a little. I have about 5 minutes left. I'll answer any questions that may come up. But while I'm waiting on your questions to come in the chat, I'm just going to summarize some key takeaways that I want you to have from this program. So thank you for joining Demystifying Mental Health. First of all, thank you for being here for our first episode. We'll come to you monthly, usually on the fourth Thursday of the month. And we are going to explore these themes of how trauma affects the brain and how we can move beyond the limitations and build healthier behaviors in our life. And so I also want to encourage you that if you are wondering whether or not you should go to therapy, the answer is yes. The answer is yes. You don't have to ask. The answer is, now let me be clear that I will I'll show you how to work with me, but I want you to know that therapy is different than what I offer here. And so let me just say that talking to someone about, and not just anyone, sometimes our friends, our family, they're great, but what they're trying to do sometimes is move us off of the emotions that we may feel at any given time and quote, make you feel better. But a therapist and a professional is trained to actually provide you with objective perspective and options that you may not even realize that you have. And it's important to hear yourself talk things out and hear how you present things and have someone outside of your life, outside of the situation to be able to bounce things off of and talk to. So, what I do is different. I want y'all to know I am retired from clinical practice. And so, what I do is I teach, I train, and I explain the brain. The Trauma Recovery Academy is a way that you all can work with me and be able to come in and explore the coursework that I've prepared for you that goes deeper into these brain systems that we've talked about today. So you're welcome to come work with me. We have a membership program for $2.99 a month where you can have access to the coursework and group coaching with me on a monthly basis. So let's look at the questions. How do I stop my brain from rewarding my unwanted behavior? That's a great question, Danielle. And so part of what we have to do is recognize that the brain reward system, we should really, a better name for it would be the brain reinforcement system. There are many times where our brain is reinforcing or addicting us to unhealthy behaviors. If we grew up in environments that were kind of rough and tough and maybe chaotic, our brain learns that this is the way, this is love. This is the way you're supposed to interact with each other. This is the way that we talk to each other. But unfortunately, what can happen is we find ourselves addicted to what I call trauma drama. Even if the problem is not there, our brain is so much so worked up into those traumas that it pulls us into that mindset. And then we accidentally continue to make that drama for ourselves. So part of that process is learning to recognize when we're engaging in those kind of addictive self-sabotaging behaviors and learn to addict ourselves to something healthier. The answer is not don't have addictions because we have a body and then we have these systems. The answer is point those systems towards something healthier with intention. All right. What part of the amygdala can I trust? That's a great question. You will start learning to trust your amygdala when you start learning to have a positive relationship with it. So what I mean by that is that our amygdala is really there to, it's like a smoke alarm system. It operates so fast and early that it starts moving you and doing things and kind of telling you things before you even realize what's happening. So being able to say, thank you, amygdala, I recognize what you're trying to give me, but separating from that having to be reality. I don't have to believe what it's showing me. I just have to see what it's trying to do. So these are all ways that I coach people, and we're going to stop there. My team is like, it's it. Okay. So stay tuned for the next episode that's coming to you for Thursdays. See you next time.